The season finale is tomorrow for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, and I think we need to give a little bit of love to the big man himself, Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin. With that being said, there may be some spoilers for this season in here, so if you're not caught up, I suggest pausing and doing that. But otherwise, welcome and let's get into it. As always, here's how we'll break it down. Their story arc and the key moments that shape them, the personality type and why it fits them so perfectly, and the traumas, wounds, and experiences that drive their behavior. As we do here, we start off by telling you a little bit of history on the characters. So, what made Fisk the menacing mobster he is? Let's get into it. Wilson Fisk was born into poverty in Hell's Kitchen. He was raised by his caring mother and a spiteful, abusive father, Bill Fisk. He wasn't the most popular kid, being raised on the heavier side, and didn't participate in sports or any school activities. Instead, he learned to uncover weaknesses of others and read people in order to use it against them. He got some of that from his father, who borrowed money from local mobsters to run for the neighborhood's local council. Not with the desire to improve things, mind you, but it was a way to make money and get rich. Classy guy. Sadly, that does not go as planned, and Bill loses the election. Because of this, he grew increasingly abusive, constantly berating and hitting little Fisk, while his mother would try to soften it by being the supportive parent. Depending on which version you go with, whether it's the comics or the MCU, Fisk commits his first murder at 12. In the comics, it's a poor maintenance worker that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the MCU, it's his dad. But either way, this leads the way for him to become the big brute of a man that he is, becoming fascinated by sumo wrestling and political science, and training to get out of his weak state. He refuses to become a henchman. Instead, he makes his own little band of teenage goons, where one of them gives him the nickname Kingpin of Crime at the young age of 15. With his trusted associate Morales, Fisk took over the operations of one Don Rigoletto, had him killed, and seized his empire. He chooses to invest in legitimate businesses to keep him looking squeaky clean, like his spices from the Far East. Even as he builds his empire, he still claims to be the humble dealer in spices. So while he claims to be a simple businessman and philanthropist, he runs the criminal underworld from behind that flimsy cover. He may not have superpowers, but he's built himself to be this man of muscle, trained in unarmed combat, and disciplined in sumo wrestling. If you haven't seen him in the comics, dude is huge. With a network of lawyers, charitable donations, and carefully managed public appearances, he's made it pretty difficult for people in the NYPD up to the FBI to pin him down and get him for anything illegal. With all of that being said, the man isn't without a heart. Sort of. He meets a woman by the name of Vanessa. The two fall in love and marry, and in the comics, they even have a son together named Richard Fisk. Richard, despite his best efforts, never quite lives up to the expectations. But hey, he tried. Another kid worth mentioning is Maya Lopez, aka Echo. In the show, Fisk takes her under his wing and becomes a father figure to her. In the comics, it's much the same, but she's a bit older and becomes a love interest for Matt Murdock at one point. But after slaying her father and his business partner, Fisk becomes the guardian of little Maya. He recognizes her talents and sends her to school for prodigies, encouraging her to become a warrior, and then manipulates her into thinking that Daredevil is the one that killed her father, setting up her path for some good old vengeance. Now, when Kingpin was first introduced, he was meant to be a villain for Spider-Man. But then later, Daredevil Comics Born Again, he becomes the primary villain and antagonist for Daredevil. Karen Page, in an unfortunate, desperate move to purchase some, lovely enhancers, she sells the name of Daredevil's identity. Fisk takes this information, ruins Matt Murdock's career, freezes his assets, and ends up getting Murdock kicked out of his own house, becoming homeless. This cements Kingpin not just as a mob boss, but as a symbol of corruption and control in every way. Throughout his career, Fisk has repeatedly lost and reclaimed his empire. Throughout his rise to power, Wilson Fisk has made adversaries, including the Maggia crime syndicate and the notorious terrorist group Hydra. For a time, these enemies succeeded in forcing Fisk to flee and give up his hold in the criminal world. But it was only temporary. Regardless of the challenges or forces that pushed him aside, Fisk consistently demonstrates an uncanny ability to get that control back including in our current run of the show, becoming mayor. With all of this as his foundation, what kind of personality category does Kingpin fit? In my opinion, he fits with the ENTJ personality, the commander, which I find funny because a future character that we'll be showing later surprisingly matches this with him. But I'll cover the similarities when we get to that character. ENTJ stands for extroverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging. Basically, control, structure, and execution. There are two different versions of Kingpin, the comics and the MCU, and both match the ENTJ or the INTJ, but overall the ENTJ sticks better. And here is why. Extroverted. This doesn't mean talkative or social butterfly. For Fisk, it means he projects power outward into the world, wants to control systems, people, and environments, and operates best when he can influence external outcomes. He doesn't hide in the shadows forever. He builds networks, manipulates politicians, and eventually steps into the public-facing role himself as mayor. Fisk's version of extroverted is, I will shape the outside world to match my vision. He's not just a planner, he's a ruler. He builds systems of power, enforces order through hierarchy, and needs to have that control over his environment. He knows he will shape the world into what it should be, or at least his version. Intuitive. Fisk doesn't worry about the small details. Everything ties into a larger vision when it comes to him. Ever since he was a kid, he's seen patterns and long-term outcomes. He thinks in terms of systems and future control and frames his actions as part of a greater purpose. His obsession with saving the city isn't random. He believes he's building a better future, even if it's through crime. Thinking. Fisk makes decisions based on efficiency, results, and structure, not emotional comfort. He'll sacrifice people if it serves a goal, and separates personal feelings from strategic decisions. His own son, Richard Fisk, tries to take over as the big man in charge, and Fisk puts him in his place. Not out of love, but as a man that needs to make an example out of those who defy him. He uses those emotions more as a tool than as a guide. Judging. One of Fisk's strongest traits, he needs order, predictability, and hierarchy. He builds rigid systems of control to keep things the way he wants them. He makes firm decisions and enforces them, no matter who that is. His entire criminal empire runs like a corporation. There's roles, expectations, and consequences if you don't live up to his standards. Chaos isn't just inconvenient to him, it's downright unacceptable. There will be order, and he will define what that order looks like. Fisk's version of ENTJ isn't just a personality, it is a power move. E equals pushing outward to control reality. N means he's driven by a long-term vision. T means executes with cold logic. And J equals enforcing structure and order. A man like Fisk doesn't just become these things overnight. There is a lifetime of abuse that he goes through to get to his point. We've already discussed some of it, but let's break it down a bit more. Abusive father. As we mentioned at the beginning, his father was into the mob. The man was so obsessed with making it big to get rich that he would literally take out whoever was in his way. Fisk watched his father abuse his mother, abuse him, and watched how he manipulated people into liking him. He's learned a lot of traits from his father, and he had to learn to adapt. He sought after predictability, structure, and control once he got older, which led him to the man he is today. Fisk builds these rigid systems because disorder is what hurt him as a kid, hence the judging part of the ENTJ. Bullying and humiliation. The boy was overweight, isolated, and constantly bullied. That social rejection just reinforced his vulnerability. To him, that weakness was a door to pain. So how do you fix that? You become strong. He's focused on bulking up, learning how to manipulate, and taught himself sumo wrestling to make sure that he would never be the weak one again. His shame converts into a drive for control and dominance over others. This feeds into the extrovert. Again, not because he's a social butterfly, but because of his presence and power over others. He focuses on results and strength, not feelings, killing his father or the maintenance worker. Whether it's the comics or the MCU, one thing is for certain. Someone died by his hands at the age of 12. In the show, it was his abusive father. In the comics, it was the poor maintenance worker. Either way, this is a massive psychological moment in his life. Violence became tied to control. His morality crossed a line that he could not come back from. The ends justify the means. His mother was no longer oppressed, or he realized that he could complete his tasks by eliminating the problem permanently. It gave him the confidence and strength that he wanted, and as he grew out of the victim and into the architect, he realized if something was broken or wrong, only the strong could fix it. and he would be the strongest at all costs. Vanessa. Now, this isn't a trauma for him, but you could count it as one for her. Because of his trauma and how he's built himself, he becomes a man who refuses to lose control until he does. Vanessa becomes a vulnerability in him, his anchor in a world full of problems. His controlled system now has one flaw, and he becomes obsessed over it. He can't control his emotions when it comes to her, so he will control her to make sure she stays safe. And God help whoever hurts her or does something against her. In the most recent book, Enemy of My Enemy by Alex Segura, one of the pressure points Matt Murdock uses against Wilson Fisk is that Vanessa is going to testify against him. In a flashback, it shows Murdock speaking with Fisk, who is certain that he's going to get out of trouble once again. Once Murdock mentions he's practically got Vanessa in a corner to go against him, Fisk shows his emotions. She is a variable that he cannot hurt or lose, and that means a lack of control, something he will not stand for. Fisk is a troubled man with a broken past and a present filled with blood and violence. When you look at him from the comic book perspective, he's ruthless and unstoppable. He is the Kingpin, a massive, vicious man who will stop at nothing to get the results he requires to keep control. In the MCU, they paint him as having a softer side, something to connect with him. I love both versions, and I would argue that the MCU version is more terrifying. The way he can be so gentle with Vanessa one moment and brutal the next is a great way to show that he is human underneath all of the pain and suffering. At the end of it all, Wilson Fisk isn't just a villain. He's not just a mob boss or a man in a white suit pulling strings from the shadows. He is a product of everything that broke him and everything he refuses to let break in him again. The abuse, the humiliation, the violence, none of it disappeared. It just got reforged into something stronger, colder, and controlling. And that's what makes him so dangerous. Because Fisk doesn't see himself as the problem. He sees himself as the solution. A man who looked at a chaotic, broken world and decided that if no one else was strong enough to fix it, he would become the strong one, no matter the cost. No matter who gets hurt. No matter how much of himself he has to bury to do it. That's the Kingpin. Not chaos, but control. Not madness, but purpose. Not evil, but conviction taken too far. And that's why, whether in the comics or the MCU, he doesn't just stand against heroes like Daredevil. He challenges them. Because at the end of the day, the real question isn't, can you stop Wilson Fisk? It's, are you strong enough to prove him wrong? Thank you so much for watching if you've gotten this far down. If you like what we do, smash that like button, subscribe for more Marvel Monday breakdowns, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for sticking it out until the end, and we'll catch you on the next week's episode.